Hi, it's Bobbie. I just want to spend a few minutes talking about progress note writing. I'm going to talk about it in terms of the perspective of the book, but I'm going to talk about it in terms of a more global issue, and that is if the reason why we write progress notes is that it isn't in the chart, it didn't happen. So I could have an incredibly powerful session with a client, and if I don't document what happened, there's no kind of, pattern. Take a look at what I'm working on with the client. And even as importantly, I've got a client right now that was recently Baker acted, and so when I meet with her, it's really important that I document the fact that she tells me she's not suicidal, so that I can make sure that I keep that in record. So progress note is really a way of being able to demonstrate that this is what happened with the client, this is what the client presented, and this is what I did with the client. And it is kind of a way of being able to follow a path to make sure we're meeting our treatment plan goals. So when you did your treatment plans that you're doing now, there's a place where you write out the problem statement and you write out the goal statement, and then you write out what the patient's going to do, what the staff is going to do to help that make that take place. A progress note is simply a way of reflecting whether or not there's any progress on achieving those goals. Now, in the old days, which was like a year ago, we used to have to write all progress notes out by hand. Now, more and more people are using electronic medical records, EMRs, to be able to it's a way of keeping a chart, so that there's no physical charts, that everything is kept in an electronic medical record. There's a lot of issues to do with making sure that they're HIPAA compliant and all that, and most of them are. And so you just want to make sure that you find one that's a good match with you. And then once you do that, when you do a psychosocial, then you're going to identify a list of problems. When you do the treatment plans, it becomes easy because it'll be reflected from what you did with the psychosocial to the treatment plan, and then the treatment plan to the progress note. So when I click on a progress note in my electronic medical record, and I use them in my private practice, I use them when I was working in a treatment facility, and I use them in my private practice. When I click on a client problem, to make a progress note, I can click on what was the objective I did, what was the client problem, and what was the objective that the client and I did together in the session. And then I basically talk about how the client presented themselves, and the electronic medical record now has got all kinds of ways of being able to prompt you, so that I don't even have to think about it. But let's just pretend for a second it wasn't prompting you. So I would take a look at what it had to say. So it would ask me questions I would look at things like, did the client arrive on time? How was the client's appearance? How was the client's speech? Were they talking kind of all over the place? They called it tangential, or were they, really kind of congruent with, making sense with what they were talking about? Were there any kind of signs of psychosis, hallucinating? Did the person did they struggle with their memory? Did it seem like their memory was intact? And basically what you do is you just then address what happened during the session, what was discussed, and then your impression of that. Now remember, you're making an impression, so you have the right to say whatever you want, impression, but don't make it sound like your absolute rule. So if a client arrived at session, discussed attending 2 AA meetings in the last week and getting a sponsor, the client appears to be motivated for treatment. I can't say the client is motivated for treatment because I don't know that for sure. But I can say things like, it appears to be, as evidenced by, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. So I can make some sort of statement about why it is that the person appears to be experiencing progress in whatever area. And then the next part of it, I just identify what's the next step, what's the next plan that I'm going to do. Did the client resolve the problem? Is there more work to be done, and what is that work? So the progress note really is a way of being able to grasp all of that. There's a couple different ways of doing it. One is the SOAP note, one is the DAP note. The book explains both those really well. You get choices when you're doing your notes on electronic medical record, how you want to do it. I usually like the DAP note because I think it's more thorough. I like the idea that it's more connected, but some people really prefer the SOAP note. So it depends on just what your style is and what your agency does, of course. So anyway, that's my little bit of progress notes. Remember, if it's not in the chart, it didn't happen. Take care. Bye.